Hello, welcome back. If you guys don't know me, my name is Sarah and I'm a software engineer in New York City. This is the third installment of Career Q&A, brutally honest career Q&A. I'm going to leave the links to the others down below. I haven't done one of these videos in the longest time, and so today I thought I'd sit down and film another one. So yeah, today we're just gonna have a little chit chat, and I also did want this video to be a little more personal, and so I have some questions that I've been getting recently in my personal life just about how it is being a software engineer, how that affects my day-to-day and things like that. So without further ado, let us get into the questions. So let's start off with a professional question. So this is one of the questions that I never got around to in my last two Q&As, and I had solicited all these questions on my Instagram. But the question is, how do you determine what you specialize in? Also, just as a disclaimer, all of my opinions are my own. It has no affiliation with my company, and yeah. When it comes to specializing in software engineering, I personally believe that it's best to start off getting experience in a lot of different fields, unless you really know what you want to go into immediately off the bat. I had a couple of friends in college that knew they wanted to do machine learning, and so they took a lot of ML classes, and that really helped them in their career. But I think for the general population, it's hard to tell what you want to work on before you even start experiencing any work within that field. For me, I did both front-end and back-end work, and I currently am a full-stack engineer, so I haven't really specialized yet. But from my experience and from talking to other engineers, a lot of the time the skills that you'll need within a certain specialty, you'll actually just pick up on the job. So my advice that I like to give is just to start off doing full stack and then specialize if you find something that you're really interested in, or you end up on a team that requires you to specialize. The next question is about picking the right company. How do you pick the right company for you? A lot of the time I feel like people look at the big name brand companies like Meta and Google and Facebook, or Facebook is Meta, or Amazon and Microsoft, and they think that working at one of these companies would be the best choice for them or the most optimal option out there. But contrary to that belief, I actually think there are a lot of aspects in picking a company, and some of those things that you should actually look for are company size, team culture, growth opportunities, and career trajectory. And one of the things I talked about in my last video was working in a small company versus a large company. There's definitely pros and cons to both, which I talked about a little bit in the last video, so I won't get too much into this time. But I think when you're deciding what you want out of your career, the difference in a large company and a small company really is how much responsibility you'll have, the kind of work that you do, and the growth trajectory that you will have. At a smaller company, it's a lot easier to take on more tasks, to have more responsibility, to be able to move forward in your career a lot faster than maybe at a bigger company. Obviously, this is not true of all companies, but generally speaking, if you go to a larger company, you're probably going to be working on a more narrow scope of a product or a project, and your work will be very defined and scoped out. Another thing that is pretty important when it comes to looking for the right company is culture. Every company has its own culture, and I think different companies are known for different cultures, and culture can be broken down into different things. It can be the people that you work with, the type of environment you're working in, the work-life balance, the values and the morals that your company instills in you. And I think a good way to get a sense of culture and the people that you're working with is by actually talking to potential team members, people in the company. When I was interviewing for a job in college, I would use Glassdoor so often to determine if I even wanted to interview with a company, just because I knew that culture would make or break my experience as a software engineer. And honestly, at bigger companies, culture is more dependent on the team itself, or even the broader organization, because I worked in both ads and search, and the culture is very different between both. And so if you do have an offer on hand, I really suggest talking to people on the team. One more thing I wanted to mention about finding the right fit is when you do find a company that does fit your cultural or career goals, you can also use that to your advantage when you write your resume or your cover letter. So you can talk to people within the company, read Glassdoor reviews to kind of do your research on what it's like working at the company, and then tailor your work experience or skills to reflect the culture that they have, the skills that are important for the job, and also indicate your understanding of the company goals, industry trends, and projects and culture at the company. So that's also one thing to keep in mind even before you get an offer from a company, when you're just like doing research on different companies and trying to figure out where you want to work. Third thing that is pretty important when it comes to finding the right company for you is career trajectory. Everyone has an idea for what they want their career to be like, and when you try to map that out at different companies, it will look different. An example of this is at some point in my career, I had interviewed for a startup, and I knew I wanted to explore PM or product management a little bit more somewhere along my career, but I wasn't sure exactly when, although I wanted to have the option to do that if I ever wanted to. So when I received an offer from this startup, I talked to them about longer term if there was any opportunity for me to maybe explore PM or do a trial run as PM. And they kind of told me that within the next 5 years I wouldn't have any opportunity for that because any PM that they brought on would probably be a senior PM. And so knowing that, I ended up not going to that company because it just didn't align with my career goals and it didn't give me the opportunities that I was seeking out. It's good to clarify the different growth opportunities that you'll have at a company before you even join on. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's different for every person in figuring out what is the right company for you. I think the best advice I have is to really sit down and write all the qualities you're looking for in the company and all of your priorities when it comes to your career, and kind of map that to the different opportunities that you have on hand. And that is probably the most concrete advice that I could give. So kind of related to that question is a question about what it's like being a female in tech. So when I was looking for my full-time job, I actually really valued having a community where there were other female engineers. But yeah, one of the questions that I have received in the past is, what is my worst story about being a woman in tech? I feel really privileged to say that I haven't been discriminated against very blatantly as a female in tech. It is a little bit tough sometimes because I personally have imposter syndrome, and so it really gets in my head. I've heard of stories where men have said very rude things to other female engineers. At Google, I'm actually really thankful that they do their best to be inclusive. Both teams that I've worked on at Google actually have been 50-50, or more like mostly 50-50 in terms of the female to male breakdown. And I think that's helped a lot with my confidence and being able to get over my imposter syndrome, because it's honestly not that easy. At the end of the day, I am very thankful that I haven't had extremely discriminatory experiences, but I know there are many examples of that out there, and my hope is that the industry improves, companies value gender equality more within the industry, and hopefully it's just an upward progression from here. I will say I'm really happy with the growth of female engineers. I'm actually going to the Grace Hopper conference this year, so if you see me, please say hi. Personal question that I keep on getting asked lately is, does your manager or your coworkers know that you do YouTube? And the answer is actually yes. So if you guys watched my day in the life of a software engineer video a couple of months ago, I said I really hope that my coworkers don't find my YouTube channel, and that has happened. It's actually not been as awkward as I expected it to be. I feel like a lot of my coworkers are super chill and cool about it, and even my manager, I've talked to him maybe like 2 or 3 times about it, and he's always so supportive, which is really nice. I will say occasionally it's nerve-wracking to think that there are people at my workplace that recognize me and have like different opinions of me, but I'm really glad that I have a supportive work environment. But yeah, my manager and my coworkers do know that I have a YouTube channel. I don't know how many coworkers know though, but I definitely know at least 4 people know. So the next set of questions actually relate to resume building. I did also talk about this in my last video. I feel like I just talked about everything in my last video. The reason I want to bring this up is because I still get many questions with regards to how to write a good resume, and people wanting resume reviews from me, which I've done a couple of times, but I think it's just better if I just say all my resume tips here in one video so it's easy to reference. So the top question is, how do you write a good tech resume? So in my opinion, I think it's particularly hard for a new grad or someone starting off their career in tech to write a good resume. Because at the end of the day, getting into the tech industry is pretty competitive. There are a lot of openings for like developers, data scientists, and other roles, but there's just so many people competing for the same roles. But I do think there are some things that you can do with your resume to kind of like stand out and get the recruiter's attention. One really important thing about the resume is to structure it properly so that you really catch the recruiter's attention. And by that I mean you can put the project section, which is probably one of the most important sections if you don't have much work experience, put that at the top so that the recruiter sees it immediately. And if you're a recent grad, I think it's pretty important for you to also have your educational information and include maybe a short list of your courses or relevant courses that you've taken. If you do have some work experience that isn't necessarily related to software engineering, but it does demonstrate certain skills, then you can have like an other work section to just show that you have certain qualities. This would probably show more work ethic than your actual specific experiences, but it also does contribute sometimes. If you are transitioning from another industry, I feel like it's best if you start off with relevant projects, work experience, and then keep the descriptions kind of brief and mostly focus on transferable skills. And if you're someone that struggles with actually writing out a resume, I'm going to point you guys to a really great resource, which is Enhanced CV. They are also the lovely sponsor of this video, but basically Enhanced CV is a resume building app. I know personally I used to struggle a lot with just even structuring my resume and finding like the right color palette, formatting it, making it pretty, but Enhanced CV actually makes it super easy for you to build really clean, sleek, nice looking resumes that are also bot friendly. And the reason I point this out is because Enhanced CV actually has this resume tailoring tool in their resume builder, and the tailoring tool actually cross-checks your resume with the job description or like the job ad and make sure that your resume won't be discarded by pre-screening bots, which I think is really cool because sometimes you apply to a job and you never hear back even though you're like, I would be perfect for this job. The second tip I have is actually very job specific. So if you find a job you really like, you should definitely take a look at their job description and see what technologies and skills they list and make sure that those skills are mentioned on your resume at least once. And the reason I say this is because sometimes companies use pre-screening bots, so an actual HR recruiter won't even look at your resume if it doesn't go past the pre-screening bot. And then the third piece of advice is if you are a developer or UX designer, you should most definitely link your GitHub or like your portfolio if you have one. It's like a very good indicator that you actually have presentable projects or a presentable website with your projects on it. So kind of a sub question leading from the previous question is what should be on a good resume? I'm not a recruiter, so this is just my personal opinion, but I think besides the basics like education, work experience, and projects, it's also pretty nice to show personality on your resume. So if you mention things like hobbies, charity, or other projects that you're passionate about, I think that's actually really nice to include on an early stage resume. And for a tech resume, I think if you have any passions within tech and you contributed to certain open source projects or did research on something that you're interested in, it's also really nice to include information on like the tech stack that you used or other skills that you developed making a project. And then one section which I think is sometimes useful is the summary section, although I think it's only helpful for certain cases. For example, if you tailor it towards a specific role that you're applying to and you want to express your career objectives that you can't really place elsewhere in your resume, then in that case I think you can put in a summary section. But the only caveat is you should make sure that it doesn't sound too generic. An example for where this might be useful is if you are like a front-end developer but you want to switch into iOS development, you can use the summary section to kind of explain how the work you've done in the past relates to the work that you hope to do with iOS development. And then you can also mention your longer term objectives with moving into this field. And then last resume specific topic is how do you structure a resume? When I was a college student, I just looked up a regular template and then structured it that way, and then I realized it wasn't a great template because I had my hobbies at the top whereas it should have been at the bottom. So the way that I've started structuring my resumes is to have the summary up top. If you do opt in to have a summary, I don't always have a summary on my resumes, and so that section's like only occasionally there. And then to have work and education experience in chronological order. I think having a skill section is also pretty important as a software engineer, so I usually put that at the bottom where I just highlight the different skills that I have, the tech stack, and also my proficiency with it. And I think it is good practice to just have relevant projects and any achievements up in the resume somewhere near the top. And when I was in college, this is something that I did pretty frequently, is to also have a strengths/achievements section where I would kind of highlight some big achievements I've made in the past. And so I would have any awards I've won, any conferences that I presented at, and things like that. If this seems like a lot of information to put on a resume, since it actually is, you can do like a double column format and you can kind of fit 2 columns of information on the resume. So the next question is a personal one. It is, are most of your friends in tech, and how do you make friends in tech? I would say a good chunk of my friends are in tech. It is more natural and easy to find people within tech when you do work in the industry. By default, you are already surrounded by coworkers, so that network kind of just naturally grows. One thing that Google does really well is that they have different clubs and organizations that you can kind of join onto that do different events. So I've met different people through the Asian Googlers network, the CAT community. I've also met people through conferences. So I remember going to Grace Hopper in college, and I'd always meet a couple of new friends from Grace Hopper. I think once you're in the tech community, it's actually pretty easy to make more friends within the tech community, and I actually have the struggle of having to actively search for friends who are not in the tech community, so that's a whole story on its own. And the last question is, have you ever burned out, and how do you bounce back from burnout? That is a great question, because I think recently I've been feeling a little bit, not entirely burnt out, but I feel symptoms of burnout. If you guys aren't familiar with the concept of burnout, burnout is basically when you stop feeling motivated to work, you don't produce as much outcome, and you kind of just are stagnant as an engineer, or I guess in any job. I think burnout is actually very common, and that kind of explains why a lot of people quit being a software engineer after a couple of years. I know there are different solutions to burnout. One of it is working less and trying to find a better work-life balance. I actually have a couple of friends who took a month off of work because they were burned out, and then they came back and started feeling a lot better about the work that they were doing. But I think burnout is inevitable for a lot of people because just the nature of like working a corporate job in a 9 to 5 and how hard you work as an engineer, it makes sense that at certain points in your career you kind of just plateau and don't want to do much of anything. One thing that I'm learning to be better about to kind of prevent burnout is taking time off, using vacation days, taking mental health days, and knowing what my limit is, because I used to push myself really hard in my career and I would never realize when I was extremely stressed or having a difficult time at work because I just wanted to do as much as I could all the time. And that's not sustainable for most people. So definitely take a breather, do things that you enjoy, and don't focus your entire energy on just your job. It's not to say I'm fully over this like hurdle, but I'm definitely trying to get to a point where I have good work-life balance and I don't hopefully burn out entirely. So that is the last question. If you guys have more questions, feel free to leave it down below and let me know, if you are someone in tech, how you feel about burnout and how you manage good work-life balance, because I am always curious because I feel like I still struggle with it. So it's definitely something that I'm learning to overcome. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.